have this idea that the mainstream media, um, top line mainstream media now, what I call the tier one publications. So I'm not talking about the kind of dipshit intern working at the Independent, say, or like Guardian opinion pieces, or even New York Times opinion pieces. I'm talking about the kind of front page headline news, BBC, CNN, Associated Press, um, Reuters, Bloomberg. I'm trying to think of some other ones now. Financial Times, New York Times. What the kind of here the Times. I mean, if you ever want to see what the regime is thinking, the Times. I always think our Times here, the London Times, is kind of you can kind of see where they are, right? And I have this way of just you can kind of pass a headline to see where they're going, okay? Because I have a theory, Nick, that the regime always telegraphs what's going to happen. They always tell you what's going to happen before it happens, and they never play 4D chess, contrary to their reputation. When they say something's going to happen, you don't get swerves, right? So, for example, when they were all in on Ukraine back 2 years ago, there were no like voices saying, "Oh, hold on a minute," or they were all in lockstep and they were all going towards, "Oh, this is going to happen." Now, sometimes what they want to happen is just wishful thinking. Okay, so like for example, the walls are closing in for Donald Trump. How many times do we see that narrative? That was them just trying to make that event happen, and because they're not all powerful, it doesn't always work. Okay, but on certain things, like for example, who's going to be the president, they really do telegraph far in advance. Okay, so in 2020, I remember sitting and watching a week before the election, the BBC telling us, "Listen, what's going to happen is ton of votes are going to come in for Trump. Trump is going to declare victory. Then late in the night, a load of votes are going to come in for Biden, and we're going to have a problem, right? Because Trump's going to claim fraud." And the BBC primed their audience, the British audience, for that. CNN did the same. I mean, all of the stations, all of the top line tier one media did the same thing. They primed the audience for what was going to happen. This time around, there was none of that. This time, it was all things like, "Oh, what's a second Trump presidency going to look like? What does it mean for your money?" Things like that. You had publications like The Atlantic saying, I mean, I remember they ran one story saying the resistance is pretty much over. Everybody's given up, basically. The difference between now and 2020 is the resistance is just, they're resigned to it. They've given up, right? So you can always tell what kind of the mood music is of the media. And where I think somebody like me is different from many other people in this space, Nick, to be frank, is that a lot of people in our spaces pay attention to what I call slop, noise. They pay attention to a lot of noise, right? That is unimportant stories that are amplified for clicks for social media. Oh, libs of TikTok, say on Twitter, is always sharing stuff that's not really that important. Okay, or it will be like some crazy left wing opinion piece at the back of the New York Times or in the Guardian or whatever, so that they often miss the signal because they're focused on all of the noise. Okay, and then within that, there is also the noise of Tory versus Labour or Democrat versus Republican. Okay, so under this kind of top line way of looking at power, you do actually have operatives trying to actually campaign. Like Kamala Harris, even though I think there was an expectation of many people that she would be there to lose, she still had a campaign and she still had $1 billion to spend, right? And they're going to have to spend that money on something and do something. So you're going to get stories that come out that are just part of that campaign, right? Or polls that they commissioned, for example, that showed her being closer to where she would be, or in the most egregious case in Iowa, 10 points up, which is, in my view, should be considered criminal. If a poll is that far out, something's gone very, very wrong. But yeah, so you understand what I'm saying, though. There's a general mood music. And since 10-7 happened, the mood music, I think, has been towards the expectation that Trump is going to be the president again, towards the expectation that America is going to drop Ukraine. How do we know this? I mean, literally, they tell us. Literally, the media just says, oh, the EU are making preparations for a Trump presidency. Oh, we need to try to make the Ukraine more Trump proof because he's going to come in again, you know? So, and they have to do that because when you have so many different people, not just the top line elites, but all of the little non-governing elites underneath, that they have to kind of know what the score is just for there to be a certain degree of predictability and stability in the system for the money men, for the markets, and so on. So they always do this telegraphing. And really, I guess the core of my prediction was just picking up on the subtle hints that they drop. I mean, one of the little tricks, for example, is the headline phrased as a closed question, right? Is the question, can Kamala Harris beat Donald Trump, or can Donald Trump beat Kamala Harris? And if it's a closed question, and again, it has to be, can't be like some BuzzFeed thing written by a 20-year-old. It has to be the big old fashioned media, right? Fleet Street, or in America, the big papers there. If it's a question like that, the answer is always no. Always no. The closed question, the answer is always no. So if the question is, can Kamala Harris beat Donald Trump? They're telling you implicitly, no is the answer. And one of the things I picked up on is that when it was a Kamala headline, it was always stuff like that. When it was a Donald Trump headline, it was always what a Trump presidency will mean for you, or here's how you can prepare type thing, or here are the sorts of people he's going to pick in his administration. So, I mean, and see, the trouble is with this, Nick, when you're saying these things back in February or June, people think you're mad. When you say it after the fact, now people think it's obvious, right? Because it's happened.